Remakes, the easy cash cow of the gaming world. Why put effort into making something new when we can bring back old stuff and sell it for more? But boy, do we eat them up. But they're not all bad. Remakes can bring a new audience who never got to play the original, and update them to feel more in line with the way our nostalgia remembers them. Heck, they can even fix and add new features to the game that haven't aged well. Sometimes remakes can lead to developers to create whole new games based on the old assets. And no series shows us better off than the Legend of Zelda franchise. Now some rules before I make this list. No ports. The game has to have been changed or updated in a way that makes it different from the original. So no GameCube ports of Ocarina, or even the Virtual Console versions, because all ports do is just move the button layout to match the new console that it's on. 2. The changes have to change the gameplay and affect the game as a whole. So lore changes and updating bad translations don't make a remake. I feel like those kind of things fall more into the ports section, so no Game Boy Advance version of the NES games. 3. The games on this list have to be made long after the original versions came out. Twilight Princess on the Wii versus GameCube are majorly different, but mostly due to the systems they came out on, and both of them came out at the same time, pretty much making them both the original version. Number 4, BS Zelda no Denchu is also not making this list because it's more like its own game than a remake. Also, I never played it. Number 5, remember, this is just my personal list, and if you disagree with me, write it in the comments, and maybe have a nice discussion with other commenters. I would love to see your top 10. With that out of the way, let's get to the list.
Good.
Number 10. Majora's Mask 3D. I cannot begin to tell you how disappointing this game is. This is off the tailcoat of Ocarina of Time 3D. Everyone was hoping this would be the next game, and I would be lying if I didn't say I got super excited when I saw the announcement. I nearly had a heart attack. But what we got was a huge letdown. Now, there is a lot of good to this version of the game. It ran and looked super amazing for the most part, and really made me feel like I was playing the game for the first time again, and felt like I thought it did when it first came out. The layout was much better for items and masks, and dedicated buttons for the instruments and tattle. It also made switching masks from items so much easier than the original. The looks of the new forms and their respective transformations look so much better. I even like the new time bar at the bottom. Not as fancy looking as the original, but it is much more cleaner. And now I can tell what time it is in the game, where before, I had a general idea at a quick glance. But the old style filled so much of the screen at the bottom, it was kinda hard to see when things were coming from that area. The change to the double song of time is also great. Being able to pick what time of day I can advance to instead of just doing it through the day and night cycle is a much better change. The addition of all the songs on the bottom screen is great. Now I can instantly play a song that I can't remember, instead of getting off the ocarina, opening up the pause menu, finding the song, and hopefully remember the notes of the one I need. The controls now feel smooth and not dated compared to the N64 version, and the addition of the gyroscope controls makes shooting an arrow fun and super quick. And the Bomber's Notebook, god, this was such a nice upgrade. Before, it was a pain to use, but now, I can tell you exactly when and how things will happen, and if something is coming up. So much easier to use. The shops and towns have foliage and posters, making it feel like it's lived in now. With all this hype I just gave it, you'd think it'd be amazing. But this is where I pull the stool from under its feet. See, this remake has a huge problem. Bad gameplay changes. For one, the tone of this remake is completely changed. See, before it was this dark and creepy game about death and acceptance, and the look added onto that atmosphere. But with the remake, they made everything look nicer. They have seemed to up the lighting a lot, which makes that dark feel non-existent, and even creepy things like the moon went from menacing to kinda goofy. Saving in the remakes is even worse for this. See, before, when you saved, you had to restart the cycle, which gives everything a sense of urgency. Now, all you need to do is find a statue and save, which gets rid of that feeling and takes away that difficulty. It did have owl statues in the original version, but that was more of a temp save, which was fine. Sometimes you need to go somewhere, but that wasn't a permanent solution. If you restarted the game, you still lose that entire progress on that cycle. Now, all you need to do is save, and if you mess up, just load up the save. The game even encourages you to do this. And these saves are everywhere now. And now, you might say, hey, it's on a handheld now. You can't expect people to restart just because their batteries are low. True, but if they made a temp save the way they save in this version, and still have the permanent save the old way, I think this problem would have been fixed very easily, and honestly, would have made it much better. The boss fights now suck. They decided to change how they work, and gave them these big dumb eyes to hit. Most of these changes suck, But the worst of all is Twin Mold. This boss fight is the worst thing I've ever experienced in these games, and I have played the Zelda CDI games.
Golly!
Look, I agree. The original version of this boss fight sucked, and the blue one was actually pretty fun to defeat. But the red one is the worst. See, before, all you did was put on a mask, it made you big, and then you slashed the hell out of both of them. The new one added in this fun light arrow segment, giving it a new layer to the fight. The new one still has a giant mode, but gets rid of the sword and adds in this timing aspect to it. That wouldn't have been a problem, but it has so much hit points, or you have to hit a specific spot, it could take all 3 days to beat him. Come on. Come on! Oh shit, the time. Oh shit. Shit! No, don't crash on me, Moon. No. Fuck! Ugh. Top this off with them screwing with the movement of characters, making some spots less fun, like the Zora swimming, to even break the game. These changes made the game worse, which should be the opposite of what is needed for a remake. A remake should enhance and fix the problems of the original, but still keep it the same as it was before. It should replace the original version as the definitive edition of the game, and I cannot say that this would be a better game than the original version. It is why I can easily say Majora's Mask 3D deserves its spot at number 10. Number 9. Ocarina of Time Master Quest. Ocarina of Time Master Quest is more an extension than a remake, but it does have some of the same qualities as a remake. Updated controls on a new system, and new elements that weren't in the original. The problem is it's just a retooling of dungeons, and nothing else is really added to the game, and a lot of these new dungeons suck. It does breathe new life into some of the old, lesser dungeons in Ocarina of Time, like now, you have more to explore in the bottom of the well. Compared to the vanilla version where it's a straight shot to the Lens of Truth and then you're just out. But personally, most fall flat. Nothing really challenging, and a lot of it was dumb hidden stuff. For example, in the Ice Cavern, there is one chest surrounded by fire, and in order to get it, you had to hit a very small chunk of diamond, hidden mostly in the ground. See, where is it? Hold on a sec. This place looks different. Awesome, ready to go. Now you might say, well, that makes sense. It does look like an ice crystal. Sure, that's all good, until you see it's in almost every dungeon. Not much to say about this one, and it's an easy pass if you're not going to play every title in the series, especially since 3D includes and is much better than this version. Number 8. Twilight Princess HD. Twilight Princess HD is an odd one for me. On one hand, I would call this the definitive version of this game, if you don't want to play motion controls that is, but at the same time there's so much wrong with this game, mostly due to the death of its platform, the Wii U. See, this remake has everything a good remake needs, like new content, upgraded modes, fixed the graphics to make it look like the way we thought it looked like back when we first played it, updated and fixed some broken gameplay controls, but its new added features are a letdown by a few things. The inclusion of the new dungeon is only accessible by paid DLC, aka Amiibo, and knowing how hard it is to get one of those suckers, a lot of people wouldn't be able to get it if they had to buy the game now. Now when it first came out, it came bundled with the game, which was nice, and you can use it in the upcoming title Breath of the Wild. And the other is these stamps they added in all over the overworld. But now they are pretty useless since these stamps are only used for the now dead Miiverse, and are really pointless to collect. And despite it being on a system that primarily uses the Wii controllers for its other players, it didn't have Wii version motion controls as an option on this HD remake. Overall, I don't have much to say about this remake other than it was kind of unneeded, and any features it did have are now dead if you can't get a hold of the Amiibo. But that being said, I would still recommend this version to people if they have a Wii U, since at very least it looks good and handles much better than the original two versions. Number 7. Skyward Sword HD. As of recording for this video, this is the most recent remake in the franchise. I'd say this remake is probably on par with Twilight Princess. It has some of the same qualities as the others on this list. Updated graphics, things are moved around a bit, a new autosave feature. They even made Fi less annoying. Thank God. But other than that, with one big exception, there isn't very big changes from the Wii version. Most of it is the same game, just nicer looking. Most of these remakes add something new, whether it be a new dungeon or a new mode, but this game only gave us a new function that's locked behind a $30 amiibo. So if you didn't get your hand on this baby, they didn't add anything new for you. But there is one big change they made to this game that made it all worth it. They gave the game button controls. See, before, when Skyward Sword was first made, it was made for the Wii. That means the gameplay was all motion controls, which was fun at the time, but looking back at it, the novelty is definitely worn off on me. Now, with button controls, this game is much easier to handle now that I don't have to wave my arms around like a madman trying to attack a bobblekin. That being said, the button controls are even more janky than the motion controls. But Nintendo is helping combat this with a lot of accessibility with it, such as being able to flip the axis up the swings. Flipping the controls definitely made it feel much better for me, and it is definitely the way I will play from now on. So why is it higher than Twilight Princess HD? Well, even though it seems like less work went into this game than Twilight, I say adding a whole new button scheme compared to a new dungeon and a few chests is a lot more work. I say pick this game up for yourself and give it a shot. Definitely be worth the play. Number 6. Link's Awakening DX. This game is great, and I would have said it's the definitive version if the Switch didn't come along, which is what I'd hope a remake would be, the definitive version of the game. So why is this only number 6? Well, my friends, we got this masterpiece to replace it, and the other remakes just offer more upgrades than this game did. The only thing this game really did as an upgrade to the original was add color and a new dungeon, and the picture feature is useless without a printer that hardly anybody ever had. But why is it ranked higher than some of the other remakes on this list? Well, that's because the pictures are still usable as a collection and pretty much look nice in the shop. And the color dungeon is a nice extra add-on that even the Switch version still uses. If the Switch version didn't come out, I would say this is definitely the definitive version of the game. But the changes aren't good enough to warrant it any higher on the list, since it's basically just an update for the Game Boy version. Heck, you can even still play it on the classic Game Boy without any problems. But it's still a nice remake, and I'll stick by that until I die. Or someone wakes me up from this nightmare I'm having. Number 5. A Link to the Past, Game Boy Advance. A Link to the Past is an odd remake. On one hand, it does add new features and updates to the game. It does downgrade some things a bit, like the sound and the field of vision, due to it being on a weaker, smaller system. I gotta put it ahead of Link's Awakening because of the fact that it was ported 15 years later to a much weaker system. But at least now it's handheld and it has a new game attached to it. For some reason, they decided to add in decompressed sounds of Ocarina of Time Link to give him some more character. But it just kinda sounds odd in the game. This game may be a demake of sorts, but that still means that a lot of work was put into it, at least more than some other games. It may be hard to tell because of my game capture, but the sprite quality is a little bit worse as well. I still wouldn't call this the definitive version of the game. Even Nintendo seems to have forgotten about this one since it was never ported to any virtual consoles. And for 4 Swords, good luck trying to find somebody with a copy of the game, a Game Boy Advance, and a link cable to play this with you. Also, some of those new features are locked to 4 Swords, so having that really doesn't help this case. But it was nice having Link to the Past on the go when it first came out, and 4 Swords is a nice way to add some connectivity with your friends. And the new added dungeon is really fun to do and kinda challenging with new enemy types, puzzles, and bosses. We even get a new reward for beating it. A new ending showing all the bad guys. A nice touch considering they didn't need to do that. While it is hard to get 4 Swords going, it's not impossible to do like other things on this list. So I say, A Link to the Past is a win of a remake, even with its shortcomings. And I think it's deserving of its spot on this list. And speaking of 4 Swords, number 4. 4 Swords Anniversary. This game. Oh, this game. You thought the normal version of this game was good. Get a load of this one. How do you make this game better? Well, you make it on the most sold handheld system, add in a cool new mode that lets you explore classic worlds, with new sprites inspired by that era, and challenges that are pretty fun to play and mess around in.
Do you have any friends to play this game with? Well, we got you covered with a single player option, and it's free! How could we make it worse? Well, it's for a limited time!
So, because of that alone, it should be way lower on this list, like number 9 or 8. But I have to judge it on how its remake improved upon the game itself, and adding in the single player alone makes this game top tier for me, in a sense that it improved the game so much that it became a pleasure to play. Which may just be a tell on how this game would have been portrayed in the fandom if we didn't need to socialize in the first place to play it. Ew, no. The addition of the new dungeon always gives me joy every time I go back to play this game. Just seeing these worlds in a new light is always a joy to see. It's just too bad it went the way of Mario 35. Let's just hope one day Nintendo will pull this game out of the vault, because I feel like everyone should enjoy this fun little game. Number 3! Link's Awakening Nintendo Switch. The next 3 games could really go in any order, and especially this game that has been remade from the ground up unlike the other 2. It really could be in the number 1 spot. But I have to rate the next 3 out of enjoyment, and I think the other 2 I enjoy a little bit more than this one. Link's Awakening on the Switch is an amazing game just on looks alone. I mean, come on, look at this. The diorama look of this game is such a great choice to do. It gives it a unique look that makes it stand out from all the other games, yet keeping it the same as the Game Boy's world. Personally, I think it'll make the game age well in the animation department. The best part about this remake? It hardly changes a thing from the original. It kept the same layout as the original. It didn't need to change the equipment, and even kept the story intact. No need to make it simpler or dumber for new players. They knew that old players would know how the game worked, but also it was already made to get new players to understand and know what's going on. They also didn't feel the need to change things like bad guys or how the equipment worked, unlike other remakes, but instead used what they didn't have back then and updated the item layout to utilize the current modern hardware. Instead of always switching between 2 items and having to jump in the pause menu every 2 minutes, they incorporated the much higher button count on the Switch and mapped most items to their own dedicated slot, making things much more smooth and streamlined for the modern standards. Now, I do have a few problems, like how useless the Dungeon Maker is, but it was a fun inclusion and replaced something that really didn't matter. Also, Link's Awakening has one of the best soundtracks in all of Nintendo, and I personally feel the remake does a little too much on the flute, but for the most part, I think the music does its part. The biggest question is, would I play this version over the original? And I say, sort of? See, it may be the same game as the original, and would definitely recommend this version every time, but I still feel like the DX version of the game is still worth going back and playing. It's just a different feel compared to the new game, and would recommend going back and playing after this one for sure. But even with all of this, it is definitely one of the best remakes, if not games, in the entire series. Definitely deserves praise, and I would definitely recommend you go and play this version for yourself. Number 2! Wind Waker HD. I had a really hard time not putting this game at number 1 on this list. For me, this game fills almost everything a good remake needs. Updated controls and item management, the game looks much better, fixed bad gameplay. But the reason for this game being number 2 instead of number 1 is a biggie. For one, Wind Waker HD really didn't do too much to improve the graphics compared to the others on this list. They more or less just smooth things out and up the bloom a little bit too much. My eyes! And they added in the Tingle Bottle. See, in the original they had this thing called the Tingle Tuner, where you hook up a Game Boy to your GameCube, a second player could control Tingle in the dungeons and help you find 5 hidden Tingle statues. It was fun trying to find all these Tingle statues with the Tingle Tuner in each dungeon, but now they kinda just give them to you, where before they were just invisible and you needed the Tingle Tuner to reveal them. Now the chests are just sitting there. But that wasn't the only thing the Tingle Tuner did. It also gave you some other cool effects. But in the HD version, they got rid of this perfect feature, considering the Wii U was made with a second screen in mind. They instead added in a bottle that sends out messages to the now dead Miiverse, which you could have done anyways without the bottle, making this function dead on arrival now. That being said, this version made me fall in love with Wind Waker, going from an okay game to one of my favorite games in the series. And that's what a remake should do for our returning player. Make them fall in love with the game all over again. Or in love if they didn't in the first place. Number 1! Ocarina of Time 3D. How do you make one of the greatest games of all time even better? Well, all you need to do is fix up the graphics, fix the problems it had before such as the iron boots, and add in past versions. Even add in a boss rush mode, which is crazy amazing that they even did that. Being able to do a gauntlet against all the bosses, trying to get faster times than your friends? What a cool thing to introduce! And the world is now more alive than ever, with towns and houses now adding in background images and plant life, even in the shops. Banners in towns, a chandelier in the Temple of Time, and making everything look less flat than before. I can even tell that these things are pillars in the 3D version. I also like how they made Master Quest harder by flipping the map and making it so you take double damage. The addition of the gyroscope and extra buttons on the bottom screen is amazing. Moving the boots from equipment to item makes things like the water temple so much more bearable than the original. Instead of pausing, moving through the menu, equip the boots to sync a bit, then do the same thing to remove them, was always a pain. Now it's an item, so you just equip it to a button, and when you want to equip or unequip them, you just hit the button, making the game so much more easier and less time-consuming with a repetitive menu. Just little details to make things easier to navigate, just makes things more streamlined and less complicated for new players. And a lot of things I mentioned in the Majora's Mask section are also here. When they remade this game, they seemed to know what made this game the greatest video game ever, and took loving care to keep everything people loved, and fixed dated and crappy problems it had back then. To even keeping in some old glitches, like the infinite sword glitch, and accidentally adding in new ones, like this one I found where you can enter Jabu Jabu as an adult, which is funny to have. But it does still have its problems. For one, they cranked the brightness up, making things less eerie and losing a bit of the feel of a ruined world. And added in the hint stone, which doesn't really give you hints so much as showing you how to do the puzzle. But this is so minor to me, I didn't even mention it in the Majora's Mask 3D rant. Overall, this game feels like a love letter to the original, and they really wanted to update it to make sure a new generation could experience this game and not be held back by its dated mechanics, instead of ruining it by fixing things that weren't broken. They improved and made it better, and honestly, it's everything I wanted from a remake, and it makes me go back to being Kid Neo every time I play it. To me, this is the definitive version of Ocarina of Time, and that's why I put it as my number 1. Well, that was just my list. Tell me, did you love it? Did you hate it? Do you love me? Let me know down in the comments below. Until next time, dude and dudettes, Neo out!